Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
now we can
Hello,
hear me. Yeah,
Bella.
I was
Well,
muted on the other end.
wonderful. Welcome, everybody, to Lunar Alchemy this week. My name is John. This is, of course, Bella. And welcome to our solar members. So nice to see you with us. We do have Bella, we do have a special guest this week who's dropping in for with the rest of our members. So we'll definitely be able to look at that, look at what's happening there a little later. But so for this week in Lunar Alchemy, we're looking at the transit, the solar transit through gate 31. So we're going to be looking at the gene key shadow of arrogance this week. This particular gene key is covering a really wide range of topics. But I think what it boils down to is the evolution of our experience of leadership and how that's looking. So there's a huge number of different topics that we can look at with this particular gene key. And I'm excited to be looking at it because this gene key connects to so many different layers of our experience. It completes, we just covered gene key 62 a couple of weeks ago and the codon ring of no return. There's a connection for it with its programming partner. And there's also a big impact right now with the channel, the human design alpha channel, which is all concerned with leadership and relates to my particular gene key through profile through gene key 7. So just to get started, if you're watching on Facebook or you're one of our members, go ahead and just write down if you have gene key 31 in your hologenetic profile somewhere and write down the sphere where it is located so we can see that, because I would love to talk about that specifically today a little bit. So that's our introduction to what we're going to be talking about. Bella, how are you doing, and how is the particular transit going on? How are you feeling this energy? How do you relate with gene key 31? I've been thinking about this gene key for a few days now, and it's really, I don't know, it puts my mind into a spin. So I want to hear your take on it.
Well, usually I love the 31. It's my attraction, and leadership. I'm interested in leadership because I feel like the future is what's going to lead us into the future. And at the same time, when I look around, my own life this week, but even more other people that tell me about things that are happening, it feels like there is so much turbulence going on in so many different ways, and a lot of it feels like it has to do with something tangible. So it's like in my house, like there is, inside the wall there's a leak, and then you have to open, or it's the physical body, or it's the garage door. Like when I think of all the people that have things, and they seem to be connected to something, like some physical turbulence. And I believe that it might not be the 31. Yesterday we were in the third line, and the third line is connected to the third chakra and to desire. So there can be, and also trial and error. So with that desire, we're here to live and explore and try and fail sometimes. So yesterday I was okay, it's the third line, so I was okay with it. And then today it was even more things that came in, and some things are kind of, serious too. That's not going to go away after the transit. I do believe, because I did look at the transit right here before we started. So there is something, maybe I should just share, not to go into everything, like maybe a little bit narrower than usual, but just so that we can I think that there is a reason for the turbulence as well, if we look at what's going on. So let's see. So you can see this, right? You can see the,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So here we have the moon in Pisces, and this is what I felt yesterday. Okay, we were in a third line. Today we are in a fourth line. So I thought that's the trial and error line. And I also knew that we had the moon going through Pisces. So that's why I felt quite wiped out. And usually I have the self-discipline and the intention, so I can still go through things. But yesterday it felt like overwhelming. And here we also have Neptune. So I believe that there are veils that are taken away. And today in my apartment, I had to tell them, if there's mold around here because there was a leak, and we just take away a rectangle in the wall, and we don't think about where the water came from, then it's probably going to be another, time we have to knock down the wall. But it was, there was like almost an unwillingness to look there, because for them there was like, no, the problem here is the electricity outlets, they're watering the outlet. But so for me it feels like Neptune always has to do with that veil, and she's in retrograde together with the moon. So I feel like that's the thing, right, with looking at taking away the veil, but also having the compassion of being ready for what's behind. And in my case, I wasn't really ready. I didn't have something to breathe through. I didn't even know what a drywall was until today, basically, or that how much dust comes out. We have like wooden houses or stone houses where I come from. Like, we don't have these things. So I really feel like there can be some things that are quite unexpected right now. And do we have the inner preparation more than anything to deal with it? Because I believe that that's going to be what is going to keep your stability and your sovereignty, or what's going to put you off center. And at the end of the day, for me, sovereignty and leadership are really two words that go hand in hand. And I feel like for me, sovereignty has to do with that meeting point of the soul and the spirit. So it's that awareness and it's that embodiment, and they meet somewhere in the middle, and that's our anchor. And for me, that's the kind of leadership that's going to be needed, because more walls and structures that are going to be teared down in the coming years, because we have to come out from those structures that don't work. And then it's going to be the leaders that can stand there in sovereignty and think on their feet, when we are faced with situations that we never have faced before.
Yeah. One of the things that this particular gene key and the shadow really makes me think of, the shadow of arrogance, is about this collective field of awakening that has been taking place for a number of years now. But I feel like in probably the last 5 years, it had a distinct acceleration happen across the social discussion, really worldwide. And to me, I really began to notice that strongly. There was a rash of change in leadership across the world, where the world leaders shifted from where they had kind of traditionally been for a longer period of time, and shifted to a particular style of leadership. We saw the election of Donald Trump in the United States. Boris Johnson came to power in the UK. The leadership in the Philippines took on a drastic shift into an authoritarian style of regime, where the no drug policies and laws shifted into like a mass execution of people who were accused of using or possessing drugs. This shift of leadership in the world was also accompanied by a movement of sort of discussing the social inequalities that are prevalent in society from a standpoint of looking at the experience of women in society and the experience of men in society, which was really highlighted through the Me Too movement and all of the shifting that came about through that. And as these movements are happening, this movement in leadership at the top level and this sort of groundswell of leadership. And of course, I don't want to, there's so many other things that have been happening in terms of consciousness movements. I don't want to just focus on, Me Too or these particular types of leaders, because there's so many offshoots in other directions. But the groundswell of leadership coming from the collective through individuals, and how this particular gene key 31 is coming through individuals and is being expressed across the collective. One of the terms that has come up during that period, that people have been using to sort of influence what other people think about them, is comes from the repressive form of this shadow of arrogance, the humble brag, where you share something about yourself that is intended to display the humility that you have. This humble brag can be expanded into the realm of spirituality. Here, this is by sharing the experiences of awakening. So some people I've noticed have a dark night of the soul brag, where they kind of love to express in public how awful their awakening experience was, because it lifts up their sense of accomplishment to a higher degree than if they're just living life and they haven't either had an experience that you could term a dark night of the soul, or if they did, it didn't get all that bad. It was just kind of a movement through a mediocre movement through that transformation. So that's one form of this shadow that's showing up. And then one of the other things that showed up during this period, specifically, Bella, around this, I love that you brought up the veil, because this is not directly addressed through the, at least that I'm not aware of, through the writings of the gene keys, the transmission of the gene keys, or in any particular way that I've noticed through the understanding of the mechanics of human design, at least regarding this particular gate. And this veil, and being able to see behind the veil, who is in power and leadership, who is working in the shadows behind what we're being presented by the media or other forms of communication from our leadership in our societies. And this reactive form of the shadow really popped up. You could see it on social media all over the place, where people would come into an awareness of a certain type of information and use that information as a tool to call other people, call out other people's behavior as grouping them into the group of the sheeple, the people who blindly follow the leadership in their society that has this deep veil of secret motivation behind it. And the people who are the sheep are being targeted as the cause of these evil activities that are being promoted by that leadership. And in that reactive shadow arrogancy, there's a self-aggrandizement occurring because they can see behind the veil what's going on. And yet they're trapped within that frequency because their message for those who would follow them, who could be transformed by the truth that they have to share, are the very people that they relate to in a scornful way. So, I mean, this gene key has just been pounding us, I feel like, for a number of years with its vibrational impact. And you know, Bella, you mentioned you have this in your attraction sphere. I've seen a couple of comments about where else this has shown up in people's profile, life, work, and et cetera. I particularly find this gene key, it's, for whatever reason, to me, I find it very interesting when it is a part of that Venus sequence, because it's such a deep aspect of that personal uncovering of depth in who and what we are. So I wonder if you could just talk about the role that you experience this in that attractor sphere.
Yeah, I mean, the Venus sequence, it has to do with, like you say, uncovering that, and the reason for uncovering that is also because we want to be able to relate in a way that is less fragmented and more wholesome. So for me, especially when we look at the purpose sphere in the Venus and the attraction, it's all about what you're going to see in relationship or how you're going to behave in relationship. It's actually before, in a way, you come into that, what we call the trinity of embodiment, which is the IQ and the EQ and the SQ, where you really kind of uncover, using your childhood and using those developmental years. For me, with the 31.6 in the attraction, well, those shadows that you spoke about is what I'm going to meet in relationship. Like, this is what's going to come up for me over and over again. And I'm going to have, I'm going to die one day rich in experiences of what is arrogance, and also rich in experience what is leadership. And I have this, I guess, yeah, from forever, I feel like I'm drawn to places of leadership, and in some way I feel like leadership is drawn to me as well. And you are speaking about the seven, we have that in common. You have the seven in the vocation, and I believe, and I have it in my purpose. So especially when you have a whole channel is the theme, you can't run away from it. When you have a hanging gate, you can kind of, you are here to experience probably different kinds of leadership, because your seven is going to look for that at their side, and it's going to attract different people to you. For me, I have the whole channel. I have it in the sixth line. So I believe, I do believe that I have a vision of like leadership that is true somehow. But then, the sixth line can look at the world and be really disappointed, or it can feel like, oh no, I'm never going to get there.
Yeah.
And I feel like, going back to the shadow, like I guess that's the thing. I'm really well versed in arrogance. Like, I know exactly what it is. The sixth line is actually accentuating that. The sixth line is mental, and we know that the 31 has to, like, it's very, like, even neuralistic programming. It knows exactly how to use words. It can like tweak a word a little bit to add a little bit of arrogance, or to tweak, so the 31.6, I think, is the worst key, where you can really kind of hurt somebody, or not even hurt them. You can like annihilate, what's the word? Like annihilate somebody with a word, and it looks completely clean, but you know that you just did it, but there's no blood. That's how the 31 works. And I can feel that in me, and I can discern it in others too. And sometimes, I almost like, I admire it, because it's like, it's really powerful, and it's really dangerous when leaders do that. And leaders can be a father of a family. Leader can be a small team. Leader is the person who kind of sets the direction, and that's in leadership in the 31 is very collective. So it's really leadership for good or for bad. and that's what I mean, I guess this is what I'm here to become wise about, and that sixth line is here to see all the nuances of that.
It's so interesting what you're saying, how it ties into, I mean, like I was saying, this gene key has so many deep connections to some of these other gene keys. When you talked about using your words to annihilate another person, you're standing on the basis of precision of that, of the 62, which is directly related to the 31 through this ring of no return. That's part of where some of that ability comes from. And it's sort of, here we are, you and I, two 6 lines, and I feel so much familiarity with that concept of being able to cleanly and precisely cut down another person while appearing to be free of maliciousness because of the like unarguable correctness of the precision. If you did it and you were actually inaccurate, then you would just be a mean person. But when you're using it as if you're just observing things the way they are, of course, that's a huge veil. There's a huge veil that says, oh, you actually perceive things the way they are. That's not really the way it is. But we can project that reality through our expression. But here, this idea of good and bad, here we have arrogance versus humility. Arrogance is bad. Humility is good in terms of our social conditioning. And yet here's this gene key that through the way of leadership is here to turn that concept of duality completely inside out. Because you can only truly be I'm saying humid.
Humble.
Humble. I'm thinking about your environmental conditions, Bella. You can only truly be humble if you can fully accept your arrogance. And those two things from a dual perspective do not belong together. They're at opposite poles because of that goodness and that badness. And the city frequency of this particular gene key is it's in such a different realm from the shadow and the gift frequencies that once it's engaged, you're completely cut off from any engagement with those poles of good and bad. And even one of the things that really blows me away about this particular gene key, and I don't know, I do not know all of the gene keys, probably even a quarter as well as you do, Bella, or to be able to just kind of draw on that information. But this 31st gene key is the first gene key that I have observed where the gift frequency is not actually that part, like an aspect of the essence of the individual expression. It is a projected reality upon the one who is expressing. So this leadership idea itself is not one that even arises out of the individual who is expressing this gene key through their energetic pathways. It's one that happens to them almost as if, and it's described almost reluctantly. When we're talking about 7 and the 31, I have 7 in my vocation. I wanted to take a moment to talk about 31 in the vocation because we have somebody joining us, the rest of our members today, who has her vocation sphere as the 31, and the dual role of the core sphere from the Venus to the vocation. When you look at the gift of leadership through the gene keys transmission, Richard Rudd says the true leaders of the 64 matrix, the 64 hexagram matrix, are those who are embodying the 7th gene key. These are the ones who they have the quality of leadership inherent in their individuality, but it's the ones who are embodying the 31 who have leadership thrust upon them by the collective. And that unique relationship between those two keys, forming that channel that you're saying, oh man, when you have this channel, it's really showing this pathway of evolution. I just want to hear your take on that particular sphere, the vocation sphere, its role, maybe its role in the Pearl sequence, or its role as the core of the Venus sequence, and how this projection of the quality of this gene key functions kind of as uniquely among the gene keys.
Yeah, I do see what you mean with the projection. And at the same time, where I feel myself go when I hear about it, it's almost more about is the throat center defined or not? Because the 31 is really a voice, and it's the voice of leadership. And the person who embodies it has that voice. It is the voice of leadership, even if it's not connected to the G, even if it's not your identity and your direction. It is still your voice. And what we would say in human design language is that what can condition that voice is especially if you have an open throat center, so that you're filtering things, you're filtering what people want to hear. And then if you are in that conditioning, you might actually speak more what people want to hear, and you might be an amazing spokesperson for somebody else's agenda. So that it's almost there where I feel that the 31, well, that's not the projection, but that's what can happen. I would say, yeah, there is something where I see what you say, and at the same time, I really feel like the person with the 31 has that voice of leadership. It's not a projection. It's there. It's true. It's actually recognized and elected by others, because it is true. It has that. And in the vocation sphere, I believe, it is about healing sovereignty at the end of the day. For me, leadership has to do with sovereignty. And that's the place when we look at it first in the healing sense from the Venus, it's to heal that sovereignty, so that you dare to show up in the world, not with false humility and not with arrogance, but that's what's the workings of it. And really what I always say, look at the line, which is the key. So for example, for Donna, who's on the call, yeah, there is going to be a projection, because that 5th line is all about projection, and they are going to put her on a pedestal, and they are going to want her to live up to that. But she, I believe, as a 2-4, she just kind of want to dance and play with her like forks, the tuning forks. So of course, to be a 2-4 that loves to be in flow and naturalness, and to have that projection on you, that you have to be the voice of leadership, and then also be burnt at stake if you don't live up to that, if you rather play your music and people don't see that as the leadership that they want to project on you. Absolutely, that's the thing. And really at the end of the day, what happens with the 31.5 when you don't fall for, like, when you can move into your essence beyond the projection, is that it's going to fuel. So we know it's going to fuel it's going to serve your life's work. It's going to be a fuel that comes into your initiative, and it's going to have to do, it's going to go through culture and how you're walking that leadership on an everyday basis. And the same thing is going to come up to the service of your life's work. So it becomes an important like triangle to see. And I was speaking to somebody today as well, you know, there is something happening in the pearl that all the keys under are helping to inform your life's work. So I believe that there is something here as well where you want to look at that vocation and see what role is this leadership serving, because at the end of the day, that brand or that life's work is going to be fueled by this vocation of leadership. Yeah.
What you're saying about, you know, for anyone who has this 31 in a prominent position in your gene key profile, when you have that undefined throat center, there's a new possibility in how the voice of leadership can manifest through you. And, you know, what this gene key made me consider, because of the role that the 7th gene key has in my profile, is that there are differences in perception about how we view a leader and what embodying leadership through our unique energetic structures means for us. When you are the voice of leadership, that means other people will see you as that top point of leadership. Whereas your experience, if you are occupying that placement, if you have that undefined throat center, you may realize that all that is happening is you are drawing through your depth of listening the collective voice that wants to be spoken. Now, if you have a defined throat center, that may manifest slightly differently for you in your experience. But it's almost as if in that undefined center, it's like this echo chamber where if you are able to move this 31st gate into those higher frequencies of the gift, that voice of leadership that comes through you is going to have instant and incredible impact on those that can hear your voice. So in terms of being able to influence the directions and the choices of others, especially, I mean, of course, you can still do it with a defined throat, but when you amplify that collective voice, that voice of leadership, you may notice a lot more obstacles popping up in your experience, rather than just being able to see, whoa, look at all the people who hear me and resonate with my message, right? If that's how you're relating to it. You may not even be relating to it. You may just be thinking in the classic Gene Key 31 sense, I hear this voice and it needs to be spoken on behalf of everyone that it impacts. Not even viewing yourself as a leader, but those other people who hear your voice and are enlivened by that voice are going to respond to you as a leader. So, you know, it's like this experience of collective perception about leadership and individual like self-direction, that sovereignty of saying, oh yeah, I am a leader. Well, maybe from this perspective of the gene key, this is something that you accept as a mantle rather than something that you, you know, have an ambition for. Maybe you have the ambition, but if you do and it's acting out, it's likely coming from the shadow frequencies. So that can be a strong indicator for you, regardless of what you have in your profile, regardless of what's going on in your human design chart, to look at yourself and say, where where am I drawing energy from, and how is it expressing through me in terms of frequency? If you accept leadership as a mantle that is being sort of requested of you by others, you're probably living that gift frequency pretty strongly. If you're living in that ambition of, I want to be a leader, I am a leader inside and I know it, I just haven't figured out how to get other people to follow me, there's probably a fair amount of that shadow frequency of arrogance running that expression through you. And I don't bring that up to say leaders are good and arrogance is bad. I say that to become aware of the impact of the energetic structures that are being created through us as vehicles. And in terms of, living your best life, higher frequency is going to take you there faster and bring fulfillment more deeply, more quickly.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up. I guess a little bit of a precision for the throat center. I believe that the open throat center can be in different situations, and it's going to tune into the collective and have a voice of leadership that can shift and morph because it's going to be more part of the context. And when we have a defined throat with this leadership, is going to, it doesn't really matter where you put that person, it's going to sound the same. Like you can put me at a dinner table, or you can put me here, or you can put, like, wherever you put me, my voice is not so much going to change, because there is that, not only the fixedness of the defined throat, but that whole channel, like it goes from that identity center, that direction, it goes from the 7 to the 31, plus it's actually a red channel for me, so it comes from the body, something I can't even do anything about. So so there's a little bit of a fixedness, for good or for bad, in depending on the frequency. A high frequency defined throat in G is probably, like, in a way, a little bit more stable, because we know what we can expect. And if it's open, it's always just that knowing how conditioning works, and we are here to peel off the layers. So that was the first thing. And the other thing is, actually, when I look at the traditional leadership gates in human design, we have this 31 that we are seeing here in the throat, pointing down towards the G. Another classical is the 45, and this is the king. It's actually already born. So what I kind of want to point at is that no leader is really climbing the ladder according to this. I mean, we would maybe speak about the 54, which is the marrying maiden, but even that is like because you marry somebody. It's not really because you have amazing leadership skills. So it's more about that kind of aspiration. But when we look at the 45, then it's the same thing as the 31. It's like it's not doing anything. It was born as the king, and it's here to be in sovereign. It's here to be in integrity and to gather people, so it can divide the resources with goodwill, in a way that serves the whole. And then the 21, it needs to be it's a manager, we call it in the 64 doors. It's here to manage, but it needs to be given by the king the land to manage. Otherwise it doesn't have any power. And what else could we say? What else key could, I mean, those are the traditional keys that somehow, it's almost like you can't fight for leadership. If we see that in the world, it's almost like against mechanics. It's because you have more weapons, or it's because you have more arrogance, or it's because you have more lies. You're like, it's not really, you're not really here to fight for leadership according to the human design mechanics, is what it looks like. So I thought I guess that the thought is going to mature inside of me, but that's what it looks like right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the way that you're putting that. I mean, the idea of fighting for leadership as essentially being a function of energy that literally has nothing to do with being a good leader. The energies that come through us that make us good leaders or make good leaders what they are doesn't involve that process. And as that idea in itself begins to germinate and sprout amongst at least the countries of our world that have democratic structures within them, we'll begin to see a wave of new leaders that are, you know, some of, to me, when we started this discussion about the change in leadership that began around 5 years ago around the world, there was, for me, there was a feeling of this proliferation of arrogance around the world, in just not necessarily to pin that on the individuals who are the leaders, but to simply say, this is the way that it's going to be, and this is the way, the only way that works. When leaderships take that position as their sort of manipulation of people, using this 31 gene key is about leaders are the ones who use words to manipulate or control others. Richard Rudd even says calling somebody who does this a leader is actually this nice sort of way to refer to it, rather than looking at it for what it primarily really is, which is manipulating language, a form of the veil, to get other people to do what you want them to do, So my hope, Bella, is that what you're talking about there in terms of leadership, that idea will grow, and we'll begin to see people who are elected not for their ability to use those sort of shadow tools to push ahead, but people who are, they are somewhat reluctant to accept that role of leadership, and only do so as the impact of their voice becomes clear amongst the collective, So I think, Bella, do you have anything to add to that before we conclude our discussion portion?
No, I feel like we brought through many threads that can be done more things with, but for today it feels like we kind of stirred the pot, and that there is a lot that we and everybody that's watching can continue to investigate and experiment with.
Yeah, I feel like this discussion really didn't has a lot of elements that can trigger deeper contemplation of these qualities. For somebody who has sort of a cursory awareness of the gene keys, and has maybe only a little bit of information about what these shadows and gift frequencies are leading to, the contemplation can only go so deep, and then even if you read the definitions of these frequencies, there's a certain frequency bandwidth of information that you have available based on your conditioning through your own contemplation, and that process may yield some pretty good results. But when you come into connection with a discussion or another person who has a wide variety of views to expand your own perceptions, then that contemplation just automatically goes to a different level. And I mean, I feel like my own contemplation of this idea and its relationship for me, I have some things to definitely think about. So if you're watching on Facebook, thanks for joining our discussion. we are going to move into the quantum healing transmission portion, which is a frequency entrainment that takes place through the quantum field in no time and no space, so that we can release the densified aspects of our consciousness that keep us imprisoned in lower frequency patterns of expression. This is not a process that is going to change you at the snap of the fingers, but it is one that can allow you to hone in on that frequency that feels more authentic to the truth of your essence. And from the perspective of Gene Keys, the essence of what we are is the city frequency. And we are simply a play of those frequencies through our experience of time and space in those lower or higher frequency expressions of shadows and gifts. And for the few human beings walking the earth embodying those city frequencies, transcending that expression entirely. So if that interests you of getting involved in that, just check out the comments. There's a link where you can join the Solar membership, and that'll give you access to all of the transmissions and the ability to download our discussions and transmissions for your own use. So we'll see you at another time. All right.